Hello, glad to be back here reading another story tonight from this book, Collected Short Stories of Ruskin Bond. And tonight's story is titled Reunion at the Regal. As you see, we are almost at the end of the book, and these are several very short stories which maybe were remaining and they have added it at the end. So tonight's story is titled Reunion at the Regal. If you want to see a ghost, just stand outside New Delhi's Regal cinema for 20 minutes or so. The approach to the grand old cinema hall is a great place for them. Sooner or later, you will see a familiar face in the crowd. Before you have time to recall who it was or who it may be, it will have disappeared until you will be left wondering if it really was so and so. Because surely so and so died several years ago. The Regal was very posh in the early 1940s when, in the company of my father, I saw my first film there. The Connaught Place cinemas still had a new look about them, and they showed the latest offerings from Hollywood and Britain. To see a Hindi film, you have to travel all the way to Kashmir Gate or Chandni Chowk. Over the years, I was in and out of the Regal quite a few times, and so I became used to meeting old acquaintances or glimpsing familiar faces in the foyer or on the steps outside. On one occasion, I was mistaken for a ghost. I was about 30 at the time. I was standing on the steps of the arcade waiting for someone when a young Indian man came up to me and said something in German, or what sounded like German. I'm sorry, I said, I don't understand. You may speak to me in English or Hindi. Aren't you Hans? We met in Frankfurt last year, he said. I'm sorry, I've never been to Frankfurt, I replied. You look exactly like Hans. Maybe I'm his double, or maybe I'm his ghost. My facetious remark did not amuse the young man. He looked confused and stepped back, a look of horror spreading over his face. No, he stammered. Hans is alive and well. He can't be, and you can't be his ghost. I was only joking, I said. But he had turned away, hurrying off through the crowd. He seemed a lot agitated. I shrugged philosophically, so I had a double called Hans. I reflected, perhaps I would run into him someday. I mentioned this incident only to show that most of us have lookalikes and that sometimes we seek what we want to see or are looking for. Even if on looking closer, the resemblance isn't all that striking. But there was no mistaking Kishan when he approached me. I hadn't seen him for 5 or 6 years, but he looked much the same. Bushy eyebrows, offset by gentle eyes, a determined chin, offset by the charming smile. The girls had always liked him, and he knew it. And he was content to let them do the pursuing. We saw a film. I think it was The Wind Cannot Read, and Then we strolled across to the old standard restaurant, ordered dinner, and talked about our old times, while the small band played sentimental tunes from the 1950s. Yes, we talked about old times, growing up in the era where we lived next door to each other, exploring our neighbors, neighbors' lychee orchards, cycling about the town in the days before the scooter had been invented, kicking a football around on the Maidan, or just sitting on the compound wall doing nothing. I just finished school and an entire year stretched before me until it was time to go abroad. Kishan's father, a civil engineer, was under transfer orders, so Kishan too temporarily did not have to go to school. He was an easygoing boy, quite content to be at a loose end in my company. I was to describe a couple of our escapades in my first novel, The Room on the Roof. I had literary pretensions. He was apparently without ambition, although as he grew older, he was to surprise me by wide reading and erudition. One day, while we were cycling along the bank of the Rajpur Canal, he skidded off the path and fell into the canal with his cycle. The water was only waist deep, but it was quite swift, and I had to jump in to help him. There was no real danger, but we had some difficulty in getting the cycle out of the canal. Later, he learned to swim, but that was after I had gone away. Convinced that my prospects would be better in England, my mother packed me off to her relatives in Jersey, and it was to be 4 long years before I could return to the land I truly cared for. In that time, many of my Dera's friends had left the town. It wasn't a place where you could do much after finishing school. Kishan wrote to me from Calcutta, where he was at, at an engineering college. Then he was off to study abroad. I heard from him from time to time. He seemed happy. He had an equable temperament and got on quite well with most people. He had a girlfriend too, he told me. But he wrote, "You're my oldest and best friend. Wherever I go, I'll always come back to you. I'll always come back to see you." And of course, he did. We met several times while I was living in Delhi, and once we revisited Dehra together and walked down Rajpur Road and ate tikkis and golgappas behind the clock tower. But the old familiar faces were missing. The streets were overfull, the streets were overbuilt and overcrowded, and the lychee gardens were fast disappearing. After we got back to Delhi, Kishan accepted the offer of a job in Mumbai. We kept in touch in desultory fashion, but our paths and our lives had taken different directions. He was busy nurturing his career with an engineering firm. I had retreated to the hills with radically different goals to write and be free of the burden of a 10 to 5 job. Time went by and I lost track of Kishan. About a year ago, I was standing in the lobby of the India International Center when an attractive young woman in her mid 30s came up to me and said, "Hello, Rusty. Don't you remember me? I'm Manju. I live next to you and Kishan and Ranveer when we were children." I recognized her then, and for she had always been a pretty girl, the belly of Dara's Ashley Hall. We sat down and talked about old times and new times, and I told her that I hadn't heard from Kishan for a few years. "Didn't you know?" she asked. "He died about 2 years ago." "What happened?" I asked. I was dismayed, even angry, that I hadn't been informed of it. He couldn't have been more than 38. It was an accident on a beach in Goa. A child had got into difficulties and Kishan swam out to save her. He did rescue the little girl, but when he swam ashore, he had a heart attack. He died right there on the beach. It seems he had always had a weak heart. The exertion might have been too much for him. I was silent. I knew he had become a fairly good swimmer, but I did not know about the heart. "Was he married?" I asked. "No, he was always the eligible bachelor boy." It had been good to see Manju again, even though she had given me bad news. She told me she was happily married with a small son. We promised to keep in touch. And that's the end of this tale, apart from my brief visit to Delhi last November. I had taken a taxi to Connaught Place and decided to get down at the Regal. I stood for a while, then decided about what to do or where to go. Rather, I waited a while, undecided about what to do or where to go. It was almost time for a show to start, and there were a lot of people milling around. I thought someone called my name. I looked around, and there was Kishan in the crowd. "Kishan," I called, and started after him. But a stout lady climbing out of a scooter rickshaw, got in my way, and by the time I had a clear view again, my old friend had disappeared. Had I seen his look-alike or a double, or had he kept his promise to come back to see me once more? I didn't know. So that's the story. It's the story of a ghost. Now there is, as I told you, there are little stories at the end of this book.